La Selva, I use La Selva as an amazing comparing spot. In these 3,000 acres, we have 2,100 species of plants. And of course, this list of species has been an effort since La Selva was established by a lot of botanical excursions to La Selva since the 50s all the way down to the 2000s or so. And we still continue adding new species. One of the main reasons for a herbarium to be in existence, such a renowned field site, is that it's a source that could be consulted by scientists. So from all the 5,000 scientific papers that are written or has been written in this field site, 50% of those publications deals with plants. If you don't know the flora of one site, you cannot do research. So it's important to have this information in order to motivate many other scientists to continue doing research. Biodiversity numbers. We can tell the world and the community in Costa Rica how diverse is such a small area because we have had scientists collecting plants systematically, and then all this information is uploaded into a public website. So the plants are not only there mounted and dry in this building, but people can have access to the information of every single specimen, which are more than 11,000 specimens of this herbarium. And this information is so important because with the global warming of these days, you can go back to the early 60s or 70s or 50s and do a virtual phenology based on collections. You can see when those plants were blooming on those months and days. And if you can go back to that same species and see if they're blooming on these times at the same months or years, that's one way to see what could be the global warming effect on the plant's behavior. And then herbariums have been showing that. Now these days, because we have those collections from maybe 100 years ago, we can see how those plants were behaving compared to how they behave on these days. So that's another good reason why we need to collect the plants. You can go back on the herbarium. You can collect and do a nice pollen collection. You can collect every single piece of the plant and even do DNA. So it's an amazing genetic bank. Herbariums can tell us about distribution of the plants. So now, because we know exactly where collected, you can make a beautiful map of all the plants of the selva, because every single collection can be georeferenced, and so you automatically can see where the plants grow. Can you just imagine how amazing it is based on collections to find out? You make a flat La Selva land, and then you pull out a coverage of only the collections. This will talk by itself, because if you know the plants that you have there, if you know the soils, you can see like the plants do grow in patches in places. And then with this, you will generate a lot of questions to be answered to the scientists. Because once you see the plants of the selva, not only with the Latin name, family, genus, and species, because maybe a species means something like the one I mentioned to you. I kind of like this, the meanings of the etymology of the names are beautiful, like astrocarium, a seed with the stars. You know, pterocarpus, a seed with wings, a fruit with wings, which is wing dispersed. You can continue with all these interesting names. But the problem is that the way I learn the plants is different because every single plant has its own use or importance in the forest. I can maybe mention the monkey pot. Could be one of the plants that I like because so far it's been used by a very keystone species, which is the macaw. People don't understand the bats, and the bats are so important in this case because they disperse these seeds. Flowers are amazing because are bee pollinated, and the bee is another problem, and people are so worried about bees, and we should be worried now about the bees, but on these days the bees are so important because if the bees disappear, supposedly the humans will disappear because they're great pollinators. The wood is so dense, it's so beautiful. It's almost 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter. It's so heavy, it's so beautiful when you see it. Sadly, people continue cutting down this tree for this amazing wood reason. Then the last one is a tree that it's quite rare in La Selva, and it's more or less one every 5 hectares in this forest. So it's one of the species that we need to talk to the politicians to change the status and to be declared an endangered species, but it's not. So it's one of those examples that when you use those 5 things that I mentioned, it clearly, scientifically, should be approved as an endangered species. But politicians don't see it like that because it's hard to avoid cutting down a tree or asking to a local farmer not to cut it down because they need the wood. So we need to find a way how we can pass down this information in order to let them know that a tree like that shouldn't be cut down.